Howdo, and welcome back to Morrigan's Creations. I'm Mark, and in last week's video we converted this ballistus Dreadnought into something more grimdark that I like to call the Deadnought. And as promised, in this week's video we're going to go ahead and paint it. So just before this, I did actually take it outside and I primed it black with Army Painter Black in a rattle can. So as soon as that was all dry, I came in with the airbrush and I used Vallejo's white primer and I started the pre-shading. So you'll notice what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to keep the lightest parts of the panel at the bottom, and that's going to help differentiate between the panels, and it's also going to make it look a little bit more realistic. And if you're wondering how I figured all this out, I didn't. I actually came across a video from a channel called Little Legends Studio, and in that video he showed off 360 of a lot of the character models and obviously the Dreadnought from the Leviathan box set and the pre-shading that he'd done. So I was always referencing back to that, and yeah, it worked really well, so thanks for showing us that. And obviously if you get the time, be sure to check him out. I'll leave the link to his channel in the description. With the pre-shading now done, I came in with Blood Angel's red contrast paint and I applied that with my airbrush, as I feel like this is where contrast paints really shine. Don't really need to thin them down with anything, just put them on a low pressure, probably about 20 psi. And I just applied this over all areas where I've already done the pre-shading. The white undercoat is going to make that red really vibrant, it's going to make this thing pop. I know Terrain by Aaron always makes fun of me when I say it pops. But obviously the lighter the pre-shade, the more vibrant the colour above is going to be. One of the best things about painting this way is the black parts of the undercoat is going to make that red go a bit more towards brown, and obviously, like I say, the lighter areas are going to be more vibrant. Makes it look really good metallics without actually having to use metallics itself. For the base, I came in again with some contrast paints through the airbrush, this time using Ultramarines Blue mixed with a couple of drops of Wildwood. This helps dull down the blue but not desaturating it in any way. I decided to do this as I felt that the contrast between the warm red and the cold blue would show the harshness of the landscape that the Dreadnought is walking through, whilst also allowing you to have your eyes drawn to the Dreadnought itself. At this point I can now put away the airbrush. I mixed Gothor Brown and Cantor Blue just to dull it down a bit but still make it look a little bit colder. I'm just going to be applying that to the skull of the undead Space Marine. If you are a regular to this channel, then chances are you've seen me paint bone quite a lot. So I just want to take the time while this footage runs in the background to say thanks for the support that I've been getting. At the time of recording, we're only 14 subscribers away from 600. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Whilst I am working through all of the bone, I am also making sure that I'm going through all the purity seals with very similar colours, if not the same colours. Probably mixed up a little tiny bit different, just to make it look a bit more like paper, but something that's still part of the Dreadnought itself. I did apply a matte varnish, but as you can see here, it is still a little bit glossy, so I don't know if I got a bad batch of varnish, or whether it is just the harshness of the lights that I'm using. If some of you are actually new to this channel, then I'd just like to say welcome, and if you don't know how I paint bone, I'd recommend going back to probably the Korgorath video. I go a little bit more in depth with that, a bit more into the recipe there. And whilst you're there, be sure to check out some of my other videos. So like I said before, this is probably my first attempt at painting in the grimdark style. And yeah, one of the things that I've noticed is that people tend to use a lot more scratchy highlights as they're working in this style. And I really wanted to push for a bit more visual of surface imperfections, which I feel is pretty important in this style, as it makes it, obviously, like I always say, a bit more realistic. Now with all that done, we're going to go ahead and base the Aquila with Abaddon Black. I did try to slow down a little bit here as I didn't want to ruin any of the paintwork that I've already done. And I especially didn't want to ruin any of the gradients that I've got from doing that underpainting. Once we've got full coverage, I then came in with a bit of Dark Reaper mixed into the Abaddon Black. And I did slowly increase the amount of Dark Reaper that I was adding each layer, just so that I could add a nice gradient, so that each individual feather would be clearly visible on the Aquila. Now I chose to use Dark Reaper as this goes more on the blue side as opposed to the grey, and as you know, red is a warmer colour and blue is a colder colour, so this is going to help balance out the overall temperature of the piece as a whole, while still keeping that nice contrast between the base and the model itself. As you can see, I also added this to the base as well, just to tie everything together. For any of the skin parts, I mixed equal parts Kislev flesh with Pallid Witch flesh. This is going to help portray that this is in fact an undead space marine. What little life is left over has degraded to this pale, sickly colour. And with that, it's finally time for something that I've been looking forward to this entire project. Streaking Grime. For those of you that don't know what Streaking Grime is, it's an enamel paint that can be applied through an airbrush or slapped on with a normal brush. And when this thing's dried, you can use white spirits and clean up most of it from the model, and it's going to leave some nice streaky patterns behind. I have seen some people saying that they didn't like the idea of putting it through an airbrush, but as long as you clean it properly, it works fine. At first I did play it safe and I thinned it down using a little bit of odorless thinner, but I found that using it straight through the airbrush is perfectly fine as long as you clean it up, like I say. In my very limited experience with this thing, I'd say the thicker the better. I did limit the Streaking Grime just to the model as I wasn't sure how the finish would react with the base. Probably would have been fine, but I then came in with some cotton buds with a bit of white spirit on them. And as you can see, this stuff is liquid gold. I'd say the best part about using this stuff is, if it doesn't seem like you're picking much up with the white spirits, you can just go in, change the cotton bud out and apply more, and that's just going to keep stripping it down. It does stain in some of the areas, probably in the lightest areas I'd say, but it works on honestly everything. I applied it to the undead space marine. By wiping it away, it looked fine, and it does gather very nicely in where the areas of chipped paint were, so I'm very glad that I bought this stuff and I'm glad that I used it. To finish off the model, I came in once again with the airbrush and I applied some ivory, thinned down nicely, and that is just going to go over all of the lights. I do actually allow this to overspray slightly as it's going to create a little bit of that OSL. Finally, I thinned down a little bit of moot green and I sprayed that over all areas where I'd previously sprayed that ivory. With everything now finished, let's go to the grand reveal.